3, 2.
Hello, good evening. This is the July 27th, 2022 Town of Littleton Board of Health meeting. We will start off in a moment with our 7 p.m. public hearing. But first, I just wanted to thank Dan and Gino for their attendance at the select board meeting on Monday. We went over the guidelines for pandemic crisis situations that we are working on as a board, and they were shared with the select board. They were open to the idea of working together when we get to those more critical levels. And they had some questions as to why, where the Board of Health, we should be able to make decisions, why we were coming to them with the document and our strategies. And we sort of let them know that, we can do better when we work together, and that we'd like to have them, in on certain decisions and be able to support us in ways moving forward should we have to make decisions regarding mitigation methods or other activities that might help in crisis situations. So I feel like that was well received. They did have a couple comments regarding defining processes for public notices and notifying the public. So for, I guess, each one of the, and I'm sorry this isn't in the packet because it was a Monday meeting issue, but we should probably put a row in on the first page where it's the levels of crisis, levels of concern / crisis. We should probably add a row there with a corresponding level of communication to residents and other businesses and folks in Littleton. So when things are, operating normally, obviously there's no communication, or maybe I'm wrong, maybe there is. But, when we get to the minor, moderate, and major impact levels, at that point, we should start to figure out which levers we're going to be pulling in regards to communicating with the public to get the messaging out. So I think it would be great to call that out. Matt Wason, I know you have the original list, and maybe we can, offline just go over the different levels and the different methods of communication in town, and then assign different levels of communication here, and then bring it back to the select board. And maybe that's just an email back and forth. Maybe it's a conversation. Maybe it's another meeting. But I definitely don't want to drop the ball on this. I want to keep this running. I feel like it's a great guide moving forward, whether it's, dealing with COVID or monkeypox or whatever the next big catastrophe is going to be.
Yeah, Kevin, heard. I can add that in, and maybe this group should review it as well at our next meeting, have it as an agenda for a discussion topic at least. Yeah,
let's do that. We'll include it in the packet, and we'll run through it. But I think that otherwise it's very well put together, and it leaves out that the piece of how are we going to communicate the messaging that we would like to put in place at these different levels. I did indicate to them that, the data from the Littleton Public Schools is our number one indicator. It's like a crystal ball, and, the Board of Health would like to see the select board support continuing to make that data available. And they are on board with that. They just want to make sure that the data that the town is receiving, it comes from one source and gets distributed amongst, through all the different avenues. They don't want different data sources. So, maybe the Board of Health are the ones that sort of compile, the school data with the wastewater data inside of our ID decision support tool. And then that can be the model that we distribute, not only to, the select board or, the different websites and advertising areas, but the public notices that go out. We can reference that tool, and which will be found on our website and very clear and concise and right to the point. Does anyone have any questions or comments on that? It'll be added to the next meeting's agenda, but I just wanted to get that out of the way.
Yeah, I'd like to see the packet ahead of time. I think I just sent Matt it now. Okay. Yeah. And then definitely have to reorder the Board of Health web page so that this is like constantly there or something. So
Right. Yeah. I have a number of notes on the Board of Health page actually that I'd like to discuss at the next meeting, if that's all right.
Okay.
with you guys.
Right. Yep.
Yeah, as I think I mentioned last time, the ball's rolling on getting our webpage redesigned as well as a health department webpage started. So now's the time we can get all of the changes made at once.
Yeah, Nancy's been extremely helpful. She's trying to get that that server that we can utilize to share our documents so they can also be public facing. So we can put our packets up there and do a file storage on the town server. So that'd be fantastic. So thanks for heading that up, Matt. I appreciate that. We also went over the Memorandum of Understanding. The select board has a couple notes on that which they'd like to address, and we decided that it's something that can be done with a couple Board of Health members and Anthony and Mark Rombacher, the select board. So Matt, what I was hoping we could do is set up a meeting with Anthony and Mark just to go over this MOU. There was just a couple points regarding the day-to-day supervision, and then changing some wording, such as, changing performance to quality of work. And then the termination, this is of substance. So the termination clause now reads, may be terminated by either party with 14 days written notice to the other. There was a suggestion made that it be changed to something more like 90 days notice. So we'll have to talk about that and negotiate that. My gut feeling is that if we're in a bad situation, we certainly don't want to be in a bad situation for 90 days. Would 14 days notice be too short? Maybe. Would 30 be better? Probably. But we should discuss that.
Yeah, this group had discussed concern about 14 days being too short to not give us more than one potential meeting or zero, depending on the calendar.
So something more like 30 would be acceptable. Does everyone agree with that?
I'm not sure they understood necessarily what the concern was, because I think they were, my read of what they're saying was terminating the contract with the agent necessarily, as opposed to this kind of agreement on oversight and operations. It wasn't really clear. So I think that's something that we'll need to kind of work through. What exactly was their concern with that deadline, that timeline? Agreed. More time is better, but I'm just not quite sure what their concern was.
Okay.
For those who are going to be meeting with them, I'd suggest perhaps kind of looking at, one of our concerns was, like, how does it fit into the org chart in the town? And we may want to ask them to kind of look at this position in the same way they would look at other positions who operate on behalf, at the behest, and under the authority of other boards and commissions. The one that jumped to mind would be the school superintendent, works on behalf of the school committee to implement their direction, policy, procedure kind of thing. So, the cemetery superintendent under the cemetery commissioners, so the chief assessor under the board of assessors. So that kind of piece of that, just as a comparator, as opposed to the plumbing inspector. Again, a very unique skill set and important role, but is really working under the under Ed Mullen, director of land use. He's a individual inspector for an individual piece under a bigger department. This position really is functioning under the authority of the Board of Health, not under the authority of the building department or even the select board, really. So we may want to just look and see if we can make sure the comparators, how do they address those other roles for day-to-day operations, administrative oversight, as well as policy direction, just so that we're kind of consistent across the board and set this person up for success, and also the level of independence that might be necessary to be able to be successful in the role.
And I think putting it in as a picture, because some people like myself are visual learners, And an org chart gives you that ability to quickly look and see where people report in and out. So having that org chart would be helpful.
Okay. Yeah, it was also brought up that select board would like to move towards having one. So they have these MOU agreements with other folks like Parks and Rec, potentially. I don't know if it's also Dr. Clenchy, but having one standard MOU that they would utilize across the board for all these different situations. But I don't know, it might not be a cookie cutter that would serve us best. So
That sounds like more of a town-wide concern that they can address independently of us. I understand their concern, but I don't think that should affect our ability to get this done.
So those are the main points. So we will, I'll set up a meeting with Anthony and Mark Rombacher, and we will get the ball rolling and report back to the board with any major changes to the document, any changes at all to the document as was approved. And then we can take it from there. But hopefully we can wrap it up. The job's been posted. I think they have one applicant. I think it's going to be reposted, and we will we'll take it from there. So moving on to the 7 o'clock public hearing regarding the COVID-19 test distribution plan. Jim, I hope you don't mind. I just took that email that you sent and sort of cut a piece of it and pasted it right into the agenda regarding distribution. But I know are there 16 boxes of tests still at your facility?
23.
23. Okay.
Yeah.
And have you spoken to Ed? I got the tour and I know where they're going to go.
I talked to Ed yesterday morning.
Okay.
What I'm going to try to do is bring him over tomorrow morning because I know our admin would love to see them leave our conference room.
I bet.
So just if I could on a couple of things and seeing it on the agenda tonight reminded me to send the an updated email I got from DPH. The kits right now, the expiration date on the kits, I think, are July 29th to 2022. Originally, they were going to be extended 3 months. The latest email, which I sent you and all the boards, is that I believe they'll extend from a year from the date on the box. So, July next year. So there are stickers that come with the boxes. So there are 23 boxes, which there's 90 kits in each box. Each kit has 2 tests. There are stickers that go on each box that have a QR code that gives the people who get the kit the ability to check the expiration date on them. So that's probably good to put on, make sure those stickers get put on there when they're being distributed. So people don't see that, oh, geez, they're only good till the end of the month. They're actually good through this time next year. And they may get extended. It seems like over time, the kit's expiration date gets extended. I don't know if that's because they have more data or whatever the case may be, but just, the kits aren't kind of bottoming out yet. They're good for another year.
So I have a conversation tomorrow with Liz, with the Council on Age, Liz Tretiak, and we'll be discussing having some of the folks from the Council on Aging put those stickers on.
Okay.
And then we'll get the distribution going. I'll have a conversation with Anthony about to where he thinks a lot of those kits should go. And I'll have a conversation with either Dr. Clenchy or the chair of the school committee in regards to their testing needs. And sidebar, just also to set a date for the board to have a joint meeting with the school committee before school starts, so that we can just sort of make a plan and set some goals for the upcoming school year.
Runway's running out quickly.
Yeah. Does anyone else have any thoughts on the distribution of test kits and ideas and where they like to see them go beyond what's on the agenda? Dan Kane, I thought you were going to have some great ideas here.
I think we covered most of them there. I know the fire department was doing testing only because the nature of their staffing that, as opposed to the police officers who come in and then they're basically solo in a cruiser. Fire department, you get a group of 4 on 24 hours straight. I know they had been testing the full timers who were in every day. I'm not sure if that's still going on. We may want to just touch base with them just to make sure that they have adequate supplies, if that's still their standard procedure. I have not talked to the chief in the last few weeks and I haven't double checked, so I apologize for that. That's probably the biggest one. I think the schools, I think COA, maybe consider Parks and Rec, only because we still have a few more weeks of Camp T, so we have a little bit of access to a relatively, not a huge population, but a significant population of the town from one spot, and be get either get the word out of availability or have them available through them as well for their campers, either for testing for I know they have a nurse with Camp T. If they need any testing or want any testing kits available for their office for the last few weeks of Camp T. So I think those are the big ones that weren't already on the recommended list from the state.
I was actually thinking maybe we should contact Diane Crory and have her send sort of an email blast out to all departments and boards, just to see if we can get a big list of folks and numbers and who might need what where. So we'll see if I can get that done somewhere else too.
We're still thinking about sending some to the library for the general population, or maybe town hall, ?
Yeah, certainly that they'll be available at town hall. And hopefully once we get this email out, we can get a hold of the library folks and have them available there too.
Has anyone in town hall accepted responsibility for having them available and answering questions? I would hate to see, for example, Diane's office, the clerk's office, have a lineup. I'm not sure who in town hall would be the answer person to, hi, I need one. I heard they were here.
Yeah,
Make sure that department's.
I imagine it would be Brenda with the Board of Health, and
Okay.
she'll have a couple boxes under her desk ready to go for folks that
Perfect.
So.
Perfect.
We can let that be known. Regarding a drive-through distribution, I don't really feel that's necessary at this point. However, if we have a stockpile after this initial distribution, and we feel we need to put something together, and Jim has a clinic or something like that, we can make that happen.
I think with the extended timeline on them, it gives you a little bit more time to thoughtfully distribute them, for the lack of a better way to put it. If you're trying, you hate to have a whole bunch of stuff that goes bad sitting in your basement, but if you've got a year, that gives you a little more time.
Right. Okay. Any other questions or comments on this issue?
Same kind of, Dan, is just like determining who the owner is going to be. And I think the only bummer with the library and town hall is that their hours are limited. And is there a possibility that we could get police or fire participation in helping make a 24/7 availability? Even if we could promise that fine, we'll handle, weekday business hours if they can handle off hours and weekends or something to that effect.
Okay.
As I said previously, I would love it if our community members could feel comfortable knowing they don't have to go get these now. It's that they'll be there when you need them.
Mm-hmm.
Because then same kind of thing, everybody goes and takes 4 of them, 6 them in the closet, and
They expire.
I don't think that's as responsible caretaking. And then the other curious thing that was mentioned in the letter was limiting the number of kits per person, family. And are we interested in that? Are we going to not try to do that? The more places you can get them, the harder it is to try to maintain that. And I don't think I'd be wild if I were the police or fire departments to then all be asked to maintain a tracking system. I don't know.
Yeah, I don't think we need to do that. That's my opinion.
Probably the only 24/7 spot would be the police station at dispatch. Because like the front desk at the fire station is not staffed after business hours. So if they walk in and pick up the phone, it actually rings at dispatch anyway. And so again, we'd have to double check with Chief Pernard and the communication supervisor and see if that's something, but 24/7, that's probably gonna be our only real resource that makes sense. But
All right, well, moving on, we have a 7:20 public hearing for 55 Orchid Drive with Scott Hayes from Foresight Engineering. It's a variance request for sieve analysis. Jim, is he also requesting a variance for the barrier?
It just needs approval of.
Approval of. Okay.
Yeah. It's not necessarily a variance, it's just the approval of the use of it. Yeah.
Okay. Let's see this Scott here.
I'm here right now.
Here comes Scott.
Good evening. Hi. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
There we go. Hi, Scott Hayes here for 55 Orchid Drive. So we went up to test this for the replacement septic system and encountered. We dug a number of test holes in the backyard, and it's really the only appropriate place on the site for a system. Given the grade, the front of the site is much higher, the back is much lower, and the house is up very close to the street. So we attempted a number of holes, and we found good depth of soil. We had fill material, and then we had a high observed water table at about 2 feet all the way through, even climbing up the hill. So we were unable to perform a percolation test because it was right up into the subsoil with the seepage. So we have requested a variance to use a sieve in lieu of perk for the upgrade of the septic system here under local upgrade approval CMR 15405. And so we took a sample, had an analysis done at geotesting, and designed based upon the rate we got back for the soil encountered, which was a loam. So it was designed on 30-minute per inch perk rate. Also, with the system, we do have a barrier, which is we're marginally required. We kind of have a choice between. I think we would still need the barrier, but placement of fill within 10 feet of the lot line. The requirement under the local regulations was very difficult to meet with the way that slope in the backyard really kind of drops off just past where the testing area was. I could share my screen and show you guys a plan if that would be helpful to you to familiarize yourself. Probably should have done that right out of the gate, huh? So, yeah. So this is here's Orchid Drive. It's just before you get to Birch Road, which is maybe another couple hundred feet beyond the front of the lot here. But this is where you come down Orchid and you really start to climb that hill. But before you crest the hill, this lot's on the right-hand side coming up from Goldsmith Street. And the existing house here is outlined in orange, built in 1920 and not really in a serviceable condition. So the proposed new house set back a little bit further from the road and not exceeding the existing design capacity of the lot at 3 bedrooms. So this was the area that we had tested behind the existing barn, and the slope in the backyard it's dropping from Orchid Drive pretty substantially right from the get-go, but that kind of levels off in this area where the existing house and barn are, and then it really starts to drop off right about here. That's a pretty good slope all the way to the lot line. So in order to meet the 10-foot placement of fill requirement, we incorporated a barrier at 10 feet out to keep placement of fill beyond that 10-foot requirement. So, we're here to, I guess, just get permission to allow the barrier so we can accomplish that goal as well with the design and not have to request an additional variance for the placement of fill. But even with a 15-foot 3-to-1 slope, we would be placing fill within 10 feet of the line, and we would also still need a barrier for a portion of the breakout, maybe not as extensively as we have it here, but it would still be required. So I think in the spirit of the regulations, the local board of regulations, this has the minimal amount of impact and the least amount of relief sought to accomplish the mission of those regulations. So if the board has any questions, I'm happy to answer them.
Thank you. Jim, do you have comments on this?
Sure. So again, upgrade, high water table. In this area here, we're always concerned about where the water is going off these lots. And again, this past spring, we had a system that got replaced, and we had still frozen ground and then crazy rains, and got a complaint from the neighbor that water is going, draining off the site. So it is important. And those are the timeframes we really see issues of surface drainage. Most of the time, if the ground can take the water, we're not having a problem. So I think in this case here, by putting that barrier in and pulling that fill back, it allows the contractor to do a little bit of grading around the property line to hopefully redirect water back onto the lot so it doesn't sheet across onto the neighbor's property. Otherwise, I don't really have an issue with its town water. Good size system for the perk rate that's there. Replacing the house allows them to, kind of adjust the lot and get the lot and the system to fit on there in a lot better situation.
Does anyone from the board have a question or comment? I guess we'll start with Matt Wason. Questions, comments on this?
No, I don't believe so. I'll come back if I do.
Okay. Dan Kane?
Yeah, as you say, I know you mentioned it. So you're raising the system up so you can get your groundwater offset. So that's why we don't need to look at the groundwater offset. You said you had standing water at 2 feet for your test holes, right?
Yeah. But there was fill, in the area, and so we had some depth getting down to fill in some of the test holes. But everywhere we got down into natural soil, the water, the modeling was at 2 feet, and we had seepage at about 2 feet during the testing. So what we're really doing is kind of just leveling off the area of the backyard a little bit more and pushing that slope out a little bit further. So, it won't be mounded other than on the rear side of it. Just kind of extending that yard out a little bit further, to accommodate the system. So, aesthetically, it won't look bad. And we are meeting the 4-foot water table offset from that high water.
Oh, perfect. That was my only question. Thank you.
Kevin Davis?
The only question that I've got is the water runoff from how you're going to be looking at it into the neighbors' yards and things like that. If I look at it just above this, it says not to scale. It's a poly barrier detail. Is that the true slope on the other side of the poly barrier down? Is that the existing slope? So if you scroll up a little bit.
I was trying to share different, let me just share a different plan. I can bring up that detail.
Yeah, that's the one. You can kind of see the poly detail there you go. Perfect.
Yeah.
Yeah, that right there. Is that the true slope that's like going into the neighbor's yard behind? Is that the envisioned slope, or is that?
No, it's a 2-to-1. I mean, graphically, it's almost shown probably at 1-to-1, but it's 2 horizontal to 1 vertical. It's something that can easily be established with vegetation. And again, we're terminating that slope 10 feet from the lot line, so it's not going to be shedding, right off the lot line. There's 10 feet leveling to the property line. Also, the area is already currently lawn grass area. I mean, we're bringing in some fill and kind of altering the slope, but we're not changing the surface cover, clearing a lot of trees to accomplish this. It shouldn't substantially alter the drainage patterns out there.
Okay. That's my only concern.
There's nothing directly down gradient in that rear corner. It's kind of shedding toward the rear yards at a lower elevation than the abutting houses. So, I know we have seen had situations where we've had things mounted and abutting structures very close to the lot lines, and really important to get that swaled away in those cases, but not the case here.
Okay, thank you for the information.
Sure.
Gino, any questions or comments?
No, thank you. Everything is fine. I think what Jimmy mentioned, it seems like they do the best they can with the room they have there. Let's hope that everything will be okay then.
All right. I have no questions or comments. Scott, thanks for the presentation. Looks like you did the best you could here. Is there a motion? Anyone?
If anybody makes the motion, I make the motion. But whatever, I didn't realize because I was working on my computer. The motion will be for, let me see.
For the allowance of a sieve analysis and
Okay,
a poly barrier.
and the poly barrier, yes, that's the motion that I make, yeah.
Second,
Okay, second, we have a roll call vote. Dan Kane,
Dan Kane, yes.
Gino Fratelloni,
Gina Ferroni, yes.
Kevin Davis,
Kevin Davis, yes.
Matt Wason,
Always, and yes.
and Kevin Baker votes yes. Thanks, Scott.
Thank you. Good night.
Good night.
Kevin Baker,
Yes.
thank you.
Did you have a question, Kevin? Sorry.
No, I just didn't hear the Kevin Baker part. Either my thing happened or.
Oh yeah, I was a yes. Thank you. So 7:30 we have our public hearing on the ID decision support tool. Matt Wason, I'm curious if you have something prepared for us, or if we're just going to talk through it.
Unfortunately, no, I don't have the graphics updated. I apologize for that. But briefly, BA5 is now the vast majority of all our cases at 80% or so. The CDC still has Middlesex County as a medium community level, mostly based upon the pretty high case rate. And then the only other piece that I actually wanted to mention, you kind of alluded to it earlier, was I feel like we at least need an informational bullet item on monkeypox for people in our community. We know there are a case in Massachusetts, and so I feel like even if we're not overly concerned about our community today or tomorrow, I think we should start having an update on it. And I would be happy to kind of include it into this bullet item. And here.
I can share with everyone the bulletin that the state has sent out. And maybe Brenda, what I can do is CC you on that, and we can somehow get it up, posted on the website in coordination with what we're working on with Nancy. Just get a, like a flashing sort of monkeypox update link to the state information that they sent
Sounds
out.
good.
Okay.
I think this one's a particularly interesting illness that's going around just because it is not following the trends and the picture that we usually expect to see from monkeypox. So I think I could also try to put something together for next time just to, again, inform people about things to look out for. But it's not your typical monkeypox picture.
And have you been tracking the wastewater numbers at all? Have you seen any increase? I haven't looked.
Wastewater numbers are kind of
Up and down.
Yeah, they're oscillating.
And I know we have a report from Jim from the 14th that we were at 20 cases, but the one he just sent out yesterday, we're at 15 reported.
$15 reported.
Does anyone else, Dan Kane, do you have any questions, comments, concerns on the current state of affairs?
No questions. I mean, I think we're in a much better place. Vaccinations are working effectively. I definitely agree with Matt, kind of the whole piece of the tool is awesome, but let's, keep it open for anything like we talked about the other night, whether it's monkeypox, whether it's drought conditions and effective, water availability or heat. Really, we try to make the tool as useful and as broadly usable as possible, which is, I think it's pretty effective at that.
Kevin Davis?
So definitely agree with everything Dan has already said, latching onto that. I took a little bit of time to read through a couple of papers and am looking at what the vaccination is, the bivalent vaccination that's going to be coming out from the FDA. Just kind of keeping the pulse on that. I remotely attended the FDA meeting on that, and it was one of the public side of the meeting. And it was interesting to listen to the FDA commissioners and what they were thinking and stuff like that. So hopefully there will be a sooner than later bivalent one that will take into consideration the Omicron variant and help everybody out with a new boosted vaccination. So.
Great. Gino, any comments, questions?
So I concur with, the question is, let's see what happened between now and while the vacation is on for the children. I'm concerned about, because the children get it, then the elderly get it. So let's see what happened between now and September. So far, we're doing okay. Let's see what happened.
When did we see the, does anyone recall when we saw the spike last fall? Was it October?
Mm-hmm.
I don't have it in front of me.
We started seeing cases creep up this time of year, and they just kept going up right through October and November. And then obviously we know what happened at Christmas time and
Right.
New Year's, yeah. So
Yeah, so it'll be an interesting comparison. See what happens in the next month or so.
So my one other comment was about the vaccination. I know the data is still not perfect that we can get, but we do know that our booster rates, based upon this report, are not blowing me away. Hovering in this, 50 to 60% for the middle ages of our population. And it's a little tough because I wouldn't necessarily want to push a booster program right now if we're hoping that a better vaccine is coming in the next few months. But I think we just have to be aware that means we're just putting ourselves in a spot where, like Jim just said, this is when a spike could start to pop out. We're not going to have that thing before school starts. And so I don't know how I feel about it, but I kind of wish the booster rates had gotten a little better recently, but I think it's that downturn in the summer and it's hard to get involvement in that. And now for sure, I think a lot of people would say, well, I'll just wait for the new one coming out, which is probably the right decision, because invariably there'll be something that, well, if you just got your booster a month ago, you can't have this yet. I don't know what that window will look like, but
right.
Something may happen.
Let me see if there's any plans, if Anthony has any plans to bring the Vax Bus into town. Jim, you don't have any plans to do a clinic, do you?
No, we're kind of waiting to see what,
Yeah.
Originally when the vaccine came out for the younger kids, our nurses had a kind of an end of the year meeting with the daycare providers. Since we had worked with them so closely throughout all the COVID time, and the consensus amongst the providers were you looked at the uptake for the 5 to 11-year-olds, and they didn't think it was going to be much better for the 6 months to 5-year-olds. And you notice on the sheet, Kevin, that I'm sending out, the state's starting to report the 6 months to 4-year-olds, and it's slow. So at this point, we were kind of waiting and seeing. And again, for the boosters, as Matt was saying, there is that talk about, when do I get boosted now? Do I wait? If I get it now, does it kind of preclude me from getting a new one when it comes out? There just doesn't seem to be a lot of demand for that. So we're kind of waiting to see what else came out. And we're working on the flu schedule for the fall, and whether something came out and could be together or just after. I guess that's what we're kind of looking at.
Okay. Sounds good. Well, yeah, we'll keep this on the agenda, the ID decision support tool, and we will, Matt, how close are you to being able to share this on the website?
We have positive signs so far. So
Okay.
It's a matter of making sure it's all about just trying to get the data updated behind the scenes. So I think worst case scenario is it's just a manual update process. And I go to Brenda and ask her that, pretty please, can you do this for us once a week? We're trying to automate as much as possible. So what Nancy from IT is looking into is can the file actually be someplace where the web is looking at it live, so that we're not I have to upload this picture every single week or whatever it is. Obviously, a live picture is much easier to manage and also more up-to-date information. Some of the data is only weekly, but some of it is actually more frequent, like the wastewater data. So things are still looking good, but I don't have a date for when it'll be there.
Okay.
I would love it if we had it like before school starts.
Yeah, that'd be great.
And I started working on the automated tool that I used with Katrina, and I'm working to recover that back. And then I've also added in the wastewater capture of the image, so at least the data is being pulled down from the sources. So that means then we can start to automate the front end to get the pictures up and all that kind of good stuff.
Excellent. Thank you guys for your hard work. It's 7:40. We'll move on to the public hearing regarding the potential regulation requiring treatment for sewage disposal systems within 100 feet of the wetlands. Potential motion to adopt a local regulation that will reduce the organic strength of wastewater to certain levels within 100 feet of wetlands. Potential regulation language could read: all sewage disposal systems within 100 feet of wetlands shall incorporate secondary treatment as described in Title V. Now, this would be a regulation that certainly, folks looking to install a sewage disposal system within 100 feet of wetlands can come before the board, explain to us that, we're not looking for a 2-foot offset. The wetlands are, it has this specific characteristic, or, the soil is consistent with this material. So, and come before the board to plead their case to why they wouldn't have to include secondary treatment. But this is sort of what we've been talking about for the past month or 6 weeks. And if I think this language is broad enough and sort of encapsulates, after my conversation with Jim, encapsulates what the board is trying to achieve without being too specific, and also allows folks a chance to not be required to put in secondary treatment. So I think it adds a great level of protection, and also is very fair to designers, installers, engineers, residents, in the fact that when a situation arises that secondary treatment is not needed, that it won't be required. Kevin Davis, any questions, comments, concerns?
I would just like to see the final language before we vote on something written down, that type of thing. I think it definitely is something to definitely consider. Strengthening that 100-foot buffer seems to make sense. But I want to see what's written down first before we propose something. Okay. I know we've had stuff written down. I just want to see the final language.
And does the language on the agenda in quotes the final sentence on the agenda item? Did you take a read of that yet?
I have. I'd like to understand where we're trying to reference that and described in Title V. Like, I think we need to have a stronger reference to where it needs to be specifically in Title V, because okay. I think the specific section within it that we're trying to do. Because if we're looking at the entire Title V section, I think it's kind of very broad, and I'd like to try to narrow the scope a little bit, if that makes sense.
It does. Jim, do you have a reference for that section?
So, I took a look at it on the agenda tonight, and you and I had talked about trying to match language up. That's on DEP's website or in Title V. And I think it could. I think what we had talked about were secondary treatment units. These are those the fast tanks, the jet tanks, those things that actually aerate the wastewater and provide some reduction in the organic strength. And so I think the language probably needs to, because there's no real definition of secondary treatment in Title V. So, but there is a section that talks about approved IA technologies, and those technologies are called secondary treatment units. So again, my thought would be is if that was the intent, to try to write this up such that it was a little more specific.
To reference a section of innovative alternative.
Yes, I mean, again, based on the conversation we had, the secondary treatment units were the things that actually provide a little better treatment.
Right.
They're actually aerated septic tanks, for the lack of a better term. And if that's what the intent was, it's probably best to tighten it up so it refers specifically to those. And those technologies can be found on the state's Innovative Alternative Technology webpage.
And then my final comment with this is, has anybody reached out to the DEP to see if there's any language change that they would suggest as well?
I haven't, but
No, I haven't
Okay.
either. I mean, Title V would have, it would allow you to place septic systems within up to 50 feet.
Yeah.
So that's Title V. So I'm not sure, and they do, the general laws allow the boards to make restricted, based on local conditions. So I'm not sure how they'd weigh in if they did.
yeah,
Okay.
if they could at all. Yeah.
It was just more of a, like, if the innovative systems, if there are other innovative systems that are coming out that are, new science that has come along that has been proven out in other places of the country or whatever. It's more of that type of discussion.
So again, one of the nice things to do is try to make this as seamless as possible and as automatic as possible. So if you reference that section, that's where the DEP puts the approved technologies. So there could be other technologies in the country, but until DEP approves them, they can't be used in the state.
Roger that.
Dan, Kane, any questions, comments, concerns?
No, I agree with if we can actually cite where in Title V and which version of Title V, just so that if Title V gets updated, that will have a gap between our regulation and Title V regulations, just so we can have a specific reference with a version of Title V, so it's consistent. I think that's the biggest change. I would agree.
Okay. Matt Wason?
No, I concur with what's been stated. That's what I'm looking for. Thank you.
Gino Fratelloni?
Well, we do have to understand that Title V is specifically the best that we have. You never know what happened in the future. Like the gentleman mentioned before, we might have a different activity and maybe something else will change. But the question is, when people have a piece of property and they're so close to the water, we're trying to help them. But the question is, no more. 100 feet is, but sometimes you have to give them a little layaway, sometime, very little, to be safe.
Thank you.
And maybe someday we'll have, the town will have, all the town might have the sewage treatment. They will be safer, but there's going to be many years to come because it's going to be very expensive to do the old town.
Yeah, no kidding. Hey, we do have a hand raised. Ted Doucette is in the audience. Let me get a comment from him. Go ahead, Ted, when you're up.
Hey, yeah, thanks for letting me in here. So I had a couple similar thoughts to what you guys are talking about right now, as far as secondary treatment unit isn't actually described in Title V. And I think it needs to be clear what you want to require. I just want this to come out the right way. I don't think you're trying to require treatment units. You're trying to require treatment standards. So I don't know if you can actually say, oh, it must be jet, it must be fast, it must be this, whatever. I don't think you can actually do that, because then it might be seen as supporting a system.
Right.
Whereas if you want to go into the secondary treatment standards and say a system that treats to this level, I don't have them up anymore. It's like, whatever it says here, 30 milligrams per liter of BOD, 30 of TSS, and then pH. I think if you're trying to reach secondary standards and that's what you're trying to resolve, I think you want to put a standard rather than trying to name a particular system.
Yes, absolutely.
Okay, so that's one thing. And then what was the other one? Oh, so if you want to get more specific, also, your description of wetland is very general and can be it could be defined in a, you might be getting to battles about, well, it's not a wetland, it's a riverfront. So
Yeah.
I think you would prefer to say a wetland resource area as defined in WPA, whatever, 310 CMR 30 section, whatever it is, and
Yep.
list like what all the resource areas are.
Got it.
I think that would make a tighter regulation.
You're probably going to get a phone call from me tomorrow, Ted.
Okay.
All
All right. So I just want to, I have another question, and I know we ended on a bad note last time, and I really don't want that. I want to present some questions, and I understand that I need to present them in a professional manner. And that's what I want to try to do. Are you aware, or is anybody aware of the cost impact of one of these units? How much it costs the owner?
Yes.
Okay.
Mucho dinero.
Yeah. So, and I mean, and Kevin, I don't know if you have anything different. We can talk about this if you want to call me. I had to do a system before without it, and then a Board of Health required it, and it was a $7,000 upcharge. So, and that was 3 or 4 years ago. So that's the number I have in mind. But anyway, okay.
Yeah, that's why we were sort of keeping it vague because, as you know, a local regulation, you can always come before the board and ask for a variance. And I don't feel that, that there's anything wrong with folks coming to ask for a variance and a variance being granted. What we did run into is a situation on a small road over by the lake that there was a suggestion made by our health agent, who's very smart, knows the land of Littleton like the back of his hand. But I guess it was the owner, contested that, probably would have won in court because we just don't have it in black and white. So we're trying to avoid those situations so things are more clear when we get in those predicaments. I understand there's an added cost. It's just another piece of protection for not only the board, its agent, but the water quality and the environment. So I don't think the board's looking to be, to cause any harm to anyone. This is all done in
Right.
good faith.
No.
I just
Yeah.
think that there's nothing we can do without having anything to go off of. So putting some language in there regarding this is appropriate.
Yeah. Okay. That's all I have for now.
Okay. Thanks for your comments.
So yeah, no, I just heard too that they extended the remote meetings until what, March of next year or something?
23. Yeah. March 23.
Yeah. Oh, okay. I don't know. I I was just envisioning, I was happy that they had released, meetings in person, because this would be one that would be nice to have in person where we can sit around a table and be face to face. And, I think it's easier to talk sometimes when you're face to face. So
No.
yeah,
Well, Mr. Mullen's working on a really nice space for us. Maybe we can squeeze in a meeting down there at some point.
Alumni Field. Let's do that. All right. Thanks, guys. Thanks for your work.
Thank you.
So, hey, Kevin, if I might.
Yeah.
There's actually by the Department of Environmental Protection dated March 20th of 2015, there's a standard conditions for secondary treatment unit certified for general use. So that's from the Massachusetts Department of Environmental Protection. So it's a several page document. It's 16 pages that actually goes through that design and installation requirements and things like that. I just went and did a quick search on that because Mr. Doucette actually brought up a very valid point about setting a standard. And in my line of work, it's like, oh, well, if there's a national or a state or whatever standard, referencing that standard might actually help out, tighten things up a little bit. But keeping it, the other thing, comment about listing out wetlands and things like that. Unfortunately, my experience with setting up a list is negative. So keeping things general is probably more appropriate than saying an immediate wetland boundary, or maybe going.
I liked what Ted said. I mean, the wetland resource area as defined in
Yeah, maybe
You know?
going to our conscom and figuring out what the appropriate language would be for them, because they define what that is, and what language or sentence would probably be more appropriate.
Okay. It's a great suggestion. Well, I'm going to make a motion that we continue this until our next meeting.
Sounds
Make a
great.
motion to continue that until the next meeting.
Seconded. Roll call vote. Gino Fratelloni.
You don't throw yes?
Kevin Davis.
Kevin Davis, yes.
Dan Kane.
Dan Kane, yes.
And Matt Wason.
Matt Wason, yes.
All right. 7:50. We have a discussion on the health department long-term goals. So as you know, we're in a big, we're in a point in the health department here where we're growing, and I feel it's necessary that we set some goals for 1, 3, 5, 10 years. And Mr. Clerk, Kevin Davis, I was hoping that you might be able to compile sort of a running document outline of ideas and brainstorming sessions that we may have that can help us to put together a plan of action in the long run.
Okay.
My thoughts on it are that, okay, in 1 year, we're going to have our public health coordinator, that person. And then what we should do is, not only will they be handling the sanitarian portion of the responsibilities, but also, regional outreach to other boards of health, seeking grants, determining community needs, all sorts of things that are within the job description. We can easily pull those, but eventually, in my mind, what Littleton needs is one single department that's not as sort of diffracted as it is now. So we have the Board of Health, and we have the Elderly Human Services Department, where very much we should be working in tandem. So I think an excellent 3 to 5 year plan would be for us to develop, with the help of the Select Board and EHS and our town administrator, help to develop a sort of overall health and human services department that can and will take care of all the responsibilities of a health department. So it's not diffracted between the Board of Health, which handles, the sanitarian and the public nursing, and then the Elderly Human Services, which also handles, a million other things that, is all sort of under the guise of the Board of Health. So I think that developing a health and human services department, much like other towns, probably will be a very concise and effective and efficient way for a health department to run down the road. And there's a lot of work to do to get there, involving town meetings and warrants and things like that. But just wanted to run that by everybody and see what thoughts were. And it's probably a much longer conversation than we're going to have this evening on it. But I wanted to get the ball rolling and then sort of try and backtrack out what steps do we need to take to get there. That's my 2 thoughts. We'll just go around the table really quick. Kevin Davis.
I have no problem running or taking notes or whatever. The setting the policy, the 2, 3, 5, 7, 10 year policy sort of kind of outlooks is something that's very exciting. I think we should also consider some of the ties into all aspects of the health. So there is this other side of the school nurses that are also out there. So if we're going to be looking at the health and human the health and human services sort of kind of department, looking at how we work with the school nurses to help drive some of those policy things, and how we can be effective with that team also is, I see, very important. So kind of a cradle to grave sort of kind of approach.
Mm-hmm.
And that way we can kind of, look at all of those kinds of things at a broader perspective.
Thank you.
Yep.
Dan Kane?
The idea of combining as a health and human services department is really interesting. Be interesting to see how it moves forward. So we're on this little cusp here between being a small community and a not quite a small community. So it's going to be a lot of change across the board in the next few years. We're really looking at a 25% increase in housing stock and volume within the next 2 to 3 years. We have
Yeah.
significant changes in a lot of our operations.
Yeah.
But it's definitely certainly an interesting approach to look forward to or look at, as well as fully building out our health department in general with a director, public health nurse, a sanitarian if it's a separate position, but looking at a real true community health needs and resource assessment, I think is going to be pretty critical. If we're looking at our goals, I think we really need to have a solid, where are we right now? Where are our gaps in service? So whether it's picking the low hanging fruit, what's easy to fix quick, that needs to be done that perhaps isn't being done as often or as rapidly as we might like, and then look at what we need to do bigger picture. So I think that needs to be our first piece. So really, once we identify this person and they start to onboard, whether we contract out with, either an agency or, UMass or one of the other organizations who maybe do a meaningful community needs assessment, will be a big piece. What are our needs? How many restaurants? How many inspections? Let's simply do a numbers game of like each inspection takes 2 hours. We've got 80 licensed places. That's every 6 months we're doing it. Okay, that's an easy spreadsheet of how many hours of work is just for that. How many average inspections do we do for Title V's? How many complaints do we get? All those kind of things. Basically, just do the big budgeting number game of what have we done and where can we expect to go with increasing in community volume, community population, community housing sites, and where do we need to be to meet those needs and be effective at it. I would love to see the department and certainly our new person, kind of approach some of our other challenges in town, kind of look at that all hazards kind of model and working with, the fire chief as emergency management director of how do we look at noise and odor that most health departments look at them often as reactive. Unless somebody complains, it's very rare that they are proactive. And I don't mean it in the bad way. Unless somebody complains, there's not a problem because we have plenty of other things on our plate. Certainly we know for Acton and the soy place over there, the odors that come across the line, there's always that challenge working with. We have no jurisdiction, although it is a noisome trade. It falls under Board of Health jurisdiction, but not our Board of Health. So, but how do we work together across jurisdictions to meet some of those needs that, odors and dust, those things, they don't care where the town line is. We talked about it briefly with, the quarry. I'm in the middle of it. That certainly, every day I go out, my car is covered in fine sand that is, I can't imagine living in New England this long going, that's granite. It's just very, very fine powder of granite. That OSHA has a standard for dust mitigation. Okay, so is that actually happening over there from a employee perspective around safety? But as a resident within, 500 or 1,000 yards, that are we being exposed to those same risks that an employee would be, but without the mitigation that OSHA requires for them? And that's certainly something that would fall under Board of Health air quality investigation. So some of those kind of pieces where we don't really have the resources. Certainly Jim's staff is awesome and working really, really hard, but doing a comprehensive air monitoring evaluation, that's cost, time, and that really isn't necessarily readily available. So identifying some of those kind of pieces, what can we do to identify things early and address them early rather than waiting. I certainly am not implying that we're anywhere near, but I grew up in Woburn, so that whole waiting for the cluster to come out of whatever the disease is, what are the challenges. At that point, you're 20 years too late. That sometimes it's nice if we can identify a concern early and go, okay, it's not a concern, but we've addressed it. Or 20 years from now, it turned out it was a concern, and now we actually have some background data so we can at least show it was identified. PFAS. It wasn't a problem until we've got adequate testing to be able to go, oh, it is in fact there. And it's probably been there all along. We just couldn't identify it with the testing that was available. Now we can, and now we're mitigating it. Those same kind of pieces. It's certainly just those challenges, which with one new person is probably not going to do that. But I think as a department, we're a smart group, and we have great people in town who we can kind of start tapping into to identify some of those things that are a little bit bigger and more complex than standard inspections or Title V, those kind of things, which are bread and butter for the board, but different.
Thank you. That's great. Matt Wason.
Yep, we spoke a little bit about this in the last meeting, but I agree wholeheartedly. There's so much going on in our community, so much change that we're going to face over the next even year. Love the idea of putting some stuff on the list that we want to aim for further out, and I think it's just going to be a matter of how do we collect all those ideas in a meaningful way. And we have 5 people right here that are going to come up with a long list, and then how do we balance that with what the community might also be interested in? So I'm excited to see that, and then figure out how we're going to actually lay out the table of what we do next.
Gino Fratelloni.
I think you have a good idea. The question is, we have to go slowly because this is a small community. I mean, a big city, even the big city, Boston, I'm telling New York or Chicago, they don't have the complex, as you mentioned before. You got to go very slowly. Let's see what 1 year will bring in. And then let's see, the Board of Health can be the biggest thing in the town. And you know what I'm saying? Because the way you express yourself, we can have nurses, we can have this. Board of Health is really indefinitely very important, but we got to work very slowly, okay?
Yeah, let's do it right. Thank you. All right. Well, we'll keep this as a standing discussion. Kevin Davis, maybe you and I will offline just to get a sort of a format for our outline, and we can take it from there.
Yeah, and it might be one of these things where we actually are doing this in person, because if we have a whiteboard with a bunch of sticky notes,
yeah, it might be a lot easier to do that. Yeah, I agree. Maybe we'll christen our new Board of Health office with a whiteboard, and we'll get them all the colors. We'll get all the colors, and we'll do it. Yeah. So 8 o'clock, administrative matters, minutes. Brenda is now handling the minutes. So I'm assuming that I don't think she's going to be there at our August 10th meeting, but maybe she can have a set or two of minutes for us to review for that meeting. Brenda, what do you think? We can't hear you. Oh, you're muted,
Brenda.
You're muted.
Sorry, I thought I unmuted myself.
That's all right.
So I am taking minutes as
Okay.
tonight. And, I'll go back and listen to them and do them up, but I should be here on the 10th.
Oh, are you? Okay. I'm sorry. I thought you
So-
said you were. Okay.
No, I'm on vacation actually next week.
Oh, okay.
It's just the way when I got hired, how things work. But next week I'm on vacation. I do have a question though. Since you talked about changing the meetings from the 2nd and the 4th to the 1st and the 3rd, well, and you said ASAP. So is that going to happen in September and not in August?
Well, we haven't talked about it yet,
Okay.
but I did send you an email about it.
Yeah.
Because there was, I think it was Matt Wason that brought it up, is that if we have to meet with the select board
Right.
regarding anything, that it makes more sense if we have our
Yes.
meetings on the 1st and 3rd weeks of the month, so
Right.
that we can get on a select board meeting as soon as possible.
Right.
So is anybody on the board opposed to changing our meetings to the 1st and 3rd, call it Wednesday of the month, starting in September?
We can try.
I have a previous commitment of the first Wednesday of every month.
Okay.
meeting. So that's going to be a little tough for me to swallow. The 2nd and 4th actually made a lot of sense, at least some schedule. So sorry, but if I need to change out, I'll see if I can do something regarding that other meeting.
All right. Yeah, just food for thought at this point. I mean, I feel like, there's a lot of people here. There's a lot of schedules that need to be played with, and it's already tough to fit them in, I know, but.
So, yeah, I did throw that idea out to Kevin, is that not that I expect it to happen very often, but in a crisis or an emergent situation where we need to get traction, to have to wait a week and a half or to try to call a special meeting, it's like, where it just seems like a tall hurdle. So switching it to first, third, it's not like the easiest thing, but I mean, I don't know how the tradition's set up, but should we explore first and third Tuesdays versus,
Yeah, maybe what we'll do is
send out some options and we can all get feedback.
Maybe we'll do a poll. We'll send out one of those fancy online polls, and we'll see what we can come up with.
But yeah, I think if everybody keeps in mind, the goal, in my mind, it was just how do we get ahead of the select board, not way behind them.
Yeah, I get it. Okay.
Kevin, just so you know, there's a hand up in the audience.
Oh, okay. Zoom user. Zoom user, go ahead. State your name and address.
He doesn't know how to do it.
Hello, can you hear me?
Hello. Yes. What's your name and address?
Kevin. Yeah, 50 Gristmill Road, Littleton, Mass. I thought I was supposed to update you this evening, but I wasn't on the agenda evidently.
Oh, I apologize for that. Yes. Can you give us an update?
Yeah, and I did send a message to Jim Graffiti today, but he may not have gotten it yet if he was out of the office at the time. No, I have completed getting rid of all the items that were identified as an issue, and I am waiting for the dumpster to be picked up. Unfortunately, my next door neighbor had a gas line leak today, and they had National Grid out in the road and 2 Littleton police officers, and I didn't call them to get it removed, but I am planning on trying to get the dumpster removed from the driveway either tomorrow or Friday, if at all possible. It looks so much better.
Okay,
And
great. Thank you so much. Thank you so much for that. Jim, what are next steps?
So I can go by and take a look if it's on our list of stall, just to kind of report back to the board, if that's all right.
That's great. Thank you, Mr. Saul.
No problem. It was very interesting listening to your whole meeting. You guys are doing great work.
Oh, thanks a lot. Appreciate it. You too.
You have a good evening.
You too. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
So I had dropped over the signed trash hauler regulations with Brenda, and we need to publish the summary of the regulation in the newspaper. And Brenda, I was hoping maybe you could speak with Diane Crory about how to do that.
Sure.
Okay, thank you. And you also have that application, and I did see what you sent me today with the letterhead, and I'll maybe what I'll do is I'll swing back in. I just have a couple notes on it.
Okay.
We'll take a look at that. Regarding correspondence, we had some correspondence from Jim to Mr. Curran regarding a failed system that they're working on. Mr. Sanders had sent an email. And Jim, do you know anything about this 160 Air Road and an odor?
I don't. I think there's maybe a facility that's approved over there, and I'm not sure if, because I think this may have come out of a planning board meeting.
Yeah,
So
I saw a notice that was posted about it, but I didn't.
Okay. So I don't know if he was going to express concerns about the potential for odors, because the other place in town from time to time has odors
Right.
that go across the property line, and So again, whether they're trying to be proactive in this case.
Yeah, and I guess it will, if it creates an issue, will certainly require some mitigation on that.
No, I know. Prior to COVID, we had some regular complaints about the other facility. We actually went and visited, tried to figure out where they were coming from. Believe it or not, the odor outside the building didn't smell like what the inside of the building smelled like. So it's, I think we kind of figured out it was, they seem to be related to change of shifts and maybe the oils on people's clothing or just smell of people's clothing. They don't seem to be as regular, though I do get calls from time to time that the odors are there. So.
And then we did have some correspondence from Jim in response to the potential brewery on Porter Road. Sounds like they're just trying to figure out what they want to do. They're kind of like throwing the kitchen sink at it, and then they'll figure out where they land, and then we'll.
Did I get that right? Provide you a little bit of an update?
Yeah, go ahead, please. Yeah, give some
I met with one of the principals for the brewery and their engineer today. They have a selectmen's meeting. That's kind of what prompted that email. So they're building a brewery there. They're going to have a tap room attached to it. So, at the health department, we're looking at what's the capacity of the septic system. They need a food service license for the bar area. It's a multi-use building, so the septic system has a certain capacity, and we need to get information about what's currently being used, what the owner who's leasing the space wants to keep for himself for other uses. So we've gotten a letter from the building owner, so we know what the brewery is going to sign for flow. And the concern was there was a whole list of entertainment opportunities that they were looking at for the tap room at the brewery. And my concern, and I expressed it in an email to the owners, again, it really surrounds the use of the place and the capacity of the septic system. So were these entertainment opportunities going to be beyond just the seating capacity of the building, where we're going to have like standing room kind of, and in our conversations today, it sounds like any of the opportunities were going to be for the people who could be seated in the space. So the message we left with the principal and the engineer was, give us a number that the septic system can carry. That'll be the number that we tell the selectmen that if they're staying within these capacities. Okay. So that's kind of so I don't know that it's going to need to arise to go to the board. I said, if you guys want to do something other than what complies, probably need to go talk to the board. But right. I think they're at a point
they're going with that.
What's that?
Yeah, if they're sticking with what the system can handle.
Right. And so I think we've worked to the point where that's what they're going to do, try to stay within their capacities.
And what's the location of this?
I believe 24 Porter. Yeah.
Yep.
24 Porter? Okay.
Yep.
Yep. It's industrial building. Does anyone have a board member update, comment, discussion? I don't think we have any attendees at this point for public input. And if no one has anything else, we can entertain a motion to adjourn. Matt Wason, are you talking? You're muted.
I'm ready. I was ready. I was closing that window and get my note. Could we please have on our agenda next time to talk and decide upon the lengths of suspensions for tobacco sales violations?
Yeah.
And that's it.
Okay. I want to entertain, if anything else doesn't go with the agenda, I'll make a motion to adjourn.
I'll second. Roll call vote. Kevin Davis,
Yes.
Dan Kane.
Dan Kane, big welcome to Brenda. Happy to see you here. And yes.
Yes. Gino Fratelloni.
Jennifer, yes. And I hope you have a good week.
Matt Wason.
Listen, yes.
And Kevin Baker is yes. Thank you, Jim. Thank you, Brenda. Thank you,
Thank you,
Dave.
guys.
And we'll
Thank
see you
you,
on
Jim.
August 10th. Bye-bye.
Okay, we'll see you on